Hey there, you're looking kind of cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out all my other socials. Enjoy. Smoke rose from sizzling pans, filling the air with an aromatic haze. Amidst the chaos, a figure in crisp whites moved with practiced precision, effortlessly juggling multiple dishes. "Table 7's entrees are ready," called out the sous chef. Without missing a beat, Aiden plated the final touches on a perfectly seared steak and slid it onto the pass. His movements were fluid, almost graceful, as he pivoted back to his station. But beneath the calm exterior, his mind raced. The lunch rush had barely subsided when Mr. Donovan, the restaurant owner, appeared in the kitchen doorway. His face was unreadable as he beckoned to Aiden. "A word after closing, please." Aiden's stomach dropped. He'd been distracted lately, his mind consumed by thoughts he couldn't shake. Had it affected his work? Was this the end of his career at Le Petit Chateau? The rest of the shift passed in a blur. As the last customer departed and the kitchen staff began cleaning up, Aiden's anxiety mounted. He scrubbed pots with more vigor than necessary, trying to delay the inevitable. Finally, Mr. Donovan poked his head into the kitchen. "Aiden, my office, please." With leaden feet, Aiden followed his boss down the narrow hallway. The office was small but tidy, with framed reviews and awards lining the walls. Mr. Donovan settled behind his desk, gesturing for Aiden to take a seat. "Aiden, I'll get straight to the point. I've noticed you seem distracted lately. Is everything all right?" The concern in his boss's voice caught Aiden off guard. He'd been bracing for anger or disappointment. I'm sorry if it's affected my work, sir. I'll do better, I promise." Mr. Donovan waved away the apology. "Your work is as impeccable as ever. That's not why I'm asking. I'm concerned about you, Aiden. You're not just my best chef. You're part of this restaurant family. If something's troubling you, I want to help if I can." The unexpected kindness cracked something inside Aiden. Months of inner turmoil bubbled to the surface. I don't know how to say this." Aiden's voice wavered. "I've been struggling with something for a long time. It's about who I am. Who I really am." Mr. Donovan leaned forward, his expression open and encouraging. Aiden took a deep breath. I think I'm transgender. I've always felt different, like I was born in the wrong body. I want to be a woman. I want to be myself." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, Aiden feared he'd made a terrible mistake. But then Mr. Donovan smiled, warm and genuine. "Thank you for trusting me with this, Aiden. It must have taken a lot of courage." Relief washed over Aiden, bringing tears to his eyes. You're not upset?" "Of course not," Mr. Donovan said firmly. "You're an incredible chef and a valued member of our team. Your gender doesn't change that. What can I do to support you?" Aiden wiped his eyes, overwhelmed by the acceptance. I'm not sure. I've been thinking about transitioning, but I wasn't sure how it would affect my job." Mr. Donovan nodded thoughtfully. "Well, as far as I'm concerned, you're welcome to express yourself however you feel comfortable here. If you want to dress differently or use a different name, just let me know. We'll make it work." "Really?" Aiden couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Absolutely. In fact..." Mr. Donovan hesitated, then continued. "I don't usually share personal information, but I think in this case it might help. My girlfriend is transgender. I've seen firsthand how important acceptance and support can be." Aiden felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to truly smile. "Thank you, Mr. Donovan. This means more than you know. Please, call me Robert. And thank you for being honest with me. Now, why don't you head home and get some rest? We can talk more about any changes you'd like to make tomorrow." Aiden nodded, still slightly dazed by the turn of events. As he left the office, he felt lighter than he had in years. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. Aiden, now going by Georgia, began exploring her identity in small ways. She grew out her hair, experimenting with different styles. Subtle makeup appeared, enhancing her features without being overstated. Her wardrobe evolved gradually. The stark white chef's jacket remained, but underneath, floral blouses and delicate necklaces began to appear. Her colleagues were supportive, quickly adapting to her new name and pronouns. In the kitchen, Georgia's skills continued to shine. If anything, the freedom to be herself seemed to enhance her creativity. New dishes appeared on the specials board, each more innovative than the last. One busy Saturday night, Georgia was in her element. She moved through the kitchen with grace, calling out orders and expertly managing multiple dishes at once. Her long hair was neatly braided back, and a hint of lip gloss caught the light as she smiled. "Georgia, that new seafood pasta is a hit," called out Michelle, one of the other chefs. "Table 12 wants to know if you'll marry them." Georgia laughed, a musical sound that filled the kitchen. "Tell them I'm flattered, but already committed to my true love, this kitchen." As she turned back to her station, she caught sight of her reflection in a polished pot. The face that looked back at her was finally starting to match the person she'd always known she was inside. The months rolled by, and Georgia continued to blossom. Her confidence grew along with her skills in the kitchen. She began experimenting with more feminine attire, feeling increasingly comfortable in her own skin. One day, as she prepared for her shift, Georgia made a bold choice. She slipped on a pretty floral dress, its soft fabric a stark contrast to the usual chef's whites. Over it, she tied her apron, creating a unique blend of femininity and professionalism. As she entered the kitchen, there was a moment of surprised silence. Then Michelle let out a low whistle. "Look at you, Georgia. You're going to put the rest of us to shame." Georgia blushed but stood tall. "What can I say? I like to keep things interesting in the kitchen." Mr. Donovan, Robert, poked his head in and beamed at the sight of her. "You look wonderful, Georgia. How do you feel?" "Like myself," she replied, her voice filled with quiet joy. The shift that followed was one of the best in Georgia's career. She moved through the kitchen with newfound grace, her dress swirling around her legs as she worked. The other chefs watched in awe as she effortlessly juggled multiple orders, her plating more artistic than ever. As word spread about the talented chef in the floral dress, curious diners began requesting to meet her. Georgia would emerge from the kitchen, flushed from the heat, but radiant with happiness, to greet her admirers. One evening, a food critic from a prestigious magazine visited the restaurant. Georgia outdid herself, creating a tasting menu that showcased her skills and creativity. As the critic savored each course, his eyes widened with appreciation. After the meal, he requested to meet the chef. Georgia emerged, wiping her hands on her apron, her dress peeking out beneath. The critic stood, a look of admiration on his face. "Chef, that was one of the most extraordinary meals I've had in years. Your talent is remarkable." Georgia beamed, her cheeks flushing with pride. "Thank you, sir. Cooking is my passion." "It shows," the critic replied. "Tell me, what inspires your unique style?" Georgia paused, considering her words carefully. "I believe that being true to oneself is the key to creativity. In the kitchen and in life, embracing who you are leads to the most authentic and beautiful results." The critic nodded thoughtfully. "Well said, chef. I look forward to following your career with great interest." As Georgia returned to the kitchen, she felt a sense of completeness she'd never experienced before. Here she was, living her truth both personally and professionally, and thriving. The review, when it was published, was glowing. It praised not only Georgia's culinary skills, but also the restaurant's inclusive and creative atmosphere. Reservations skyrocketed, and soon Le Petit Chateau became known as one of the most innovative and welcoming establishments in the city. Georgia's journey inspired others in the culinary world. She began receiving invitations to speak at cooking schools and industry events, sharing her story of self-discovery and the importance of authenticity in the kitchen. One day, as Georgia was prepping for the evening service, Robert called her into his office. She entered, smoothing down her apron over another cheerful dress. "Georgia, I have some news," Robert began, his expression serious. For a moment, old fears resurfaced, but then Robert broke into a wide grin. "We've been nominated for a James Beard Award. Best New Restaurant." Georgia gasped. her hands flying to her mouth. "Are you serious?" Robert nodded, his eyes shining with pride. "And you, my dear, are nominated for Rising Star Chef of the Year." Tears welled up in Georgia's eyes. She thought of the scared, conflicted person she'd been just a year ago, hiding her true self and fearing for her career. Now here she was, nominated for one of the highest honors in the culinary world. "I couldn't have done it without your support, Robert," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Robert stood and came around the desk to embrace her. "You did this, Georgia. Your talent, your courage, your authenticity. That's what brought us here." As they broke apart, both wiping away tears, Robert chuckled. "You know, when I told you about my girlfriend being transgender, I never imagined it would lead to all this. You've changed this restaurant, Georgia. You've changed all of us for the better." Georgia smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought her to this moment. "I just followed my heart. In the kitchen and in life." "Well, your heart has excellent taste," Robert quipped. "Now, what do you say we get back out there and show the world what Le Petit Chateau is really made of?" Georgia nodded, squaring her shoulders. As she walked back into the kitchen, her dress swirling around her legs and her chef's knives glinting at her station, she felt a profound sense of rightness. This was who she was meant to be. A woman, a chef, an artist. Georgia took a deep breath, inhaling the mingled scents of herbs and spices, and got to work. She had a James Beard Award to win, after all. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. As news of the James Beard nomination spread, Le Petit Chateau became the hottest reservation in town. Georgia found herself at the center of a media storm, with food bloggers and journalists clamoring for interviews. She approached each opportunity with grace and honesty, sharing her journey and her passion for cooking. One crisp autumn evening, as Georgia was putting the finishing touches on a new fall menu, a familiar face appeared in the kitchen doorway. It was Michel, grinning from ear to ear. "Georgia, there's someone here to see you," he said, barely containing his excitement. Curious, Georgia wiped her hands and followed Michel out to the dining room. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw who was waiting. It was Julia Chen, the renowned chef and restaurateur who had been Georgia's culinary idol for years. Julia stood as Georgia approached, her eyes twinkling with admiration. "Chef Georgia," Julia said warmly, extending her hand. "I hope you don't mind me dropping in unannounced. I simply had to meet the chef everyone's talking about." Georgia shook Julia's hand, trying to keep her composure. "It's an honor to meet you, Chef Chen. You've been an inspiration to me for years." Julia smiled. "Well, now you're inspiring a whole new generation of chefs. I've been following your work, and I must say I'm impressed, not just with your culinary skills, but with your courage and authenticity." Georgia blushed, still not entirely used to such praise. "Thank you. I've just tried to be true to myself, both in and out of the kitchen. And that's exactly why I'm here," Julia said, her tone becoming more serious. "I'm putting together a new cookbook featuring innovative chefs who are breaking barriers in the culinary world. I'd be honored if you'd contribute a recipe and share your story." Georgia's eyes widened. "Me? In your cookbook? I don't know what to say." Julia laughed. "Say yes." Your journey from Aden to Georgia, and the way you've integrated your personal growth with your culinary evolution, it's exactly the kind of story that needs to be told. Tears pricked at Georgia's eyes. "In that case, how could I possibly say no? Thank you, Chef Chen. This means the world to me." As Julia departed with promises to be in touch, Georgia returned to the kitchen in a daze. Robert was waiting, having heard about the surprise visitor. "So," he said, grinning, "looks like our Georgia is going to be a published author. What do you think about that?" Georgia shook her head in disbelief. "It's incredible. A year ago, I was terrified of losing my job if anyone found out who I really was. Now I'm being asked to share my story with the world. It's more than I ever dreamed possible." Robert squeezed her shoulder affectionately. "You deserve every bit of it, Georgia. Now how about we celebrate with a new special for tonight's menu?" Georgia's eyes lit up. "I have just the thing. A dish that represents transformation. Something delicate and beautiful, but with hidden depths and complexity." As she set to work, her mind already racing with ideas, Georgia felt a profound sense of gratitude for Robert's acceptance, for her colleagues' support, for the opportunities that had opened up before her, but most of all, for the courage she'd found to be true to herself. The James Beard Awards ceremony arrived in a flurry of excitement. Georgia stood before the mirror in her hotel room, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back at her. Gone was the timid chef hiding behind a mask of masculinity. In her place stood a confident woman in a stunning evening gown, her hair elegantly styled and her makeup flawless. A knock at the door startled her from her reverie. It was Robert, looking dapper in a tuxedo. "Ready to go, superstar?" he asked, offering his arm. Georgia took a deep breath and nodded. "As I'll ever be." The awards ceremony was a blur of glamour and anticipation. Georgia sat with the Le Petit Chateau team, her heart pounding as each category was announced. When Best New Restaurant came up, she gripped Robert's hand tightly. And the award goes to Le Petit Chateau. The team erupted in cheers. Georgia found herself swept up in a group hug as they made their way to the stage. Robert delivered a heartfelt speech, praising the hard work and creativity of his staff. As he spoke about creating an inclusive and innovative environment, his eyes met Georgia's, filled with pride. Then came the moment Georgia had both dreaded and longed for: Rising Star Chef of the Year. And the James Beard Award for Rising Star Chef of the Year goes to Georgia Lawrence of Le Petit Chateau. The applause was deafening. Georgia rose on shaky legs, hardly able to believe it was real. As she made her way to the stage, she saw faces beaming with genuine joy for her success. Standing at the podium, clutching her award, Georgia took a moment to compose herself. "Thank you," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "This award means more to me than I can express. A year ago, I was hiding who I truly was, afraid that being myself would mean the end of my culinary career. I want to thank Robert Donovan and the entire team at Le Petit Chateau for showing me that I was wrong, that I could be authentically myself and still pursue my passion for cooking." She paused, taking in the supportive faces before her. To any young chef out there who feels different, who feels like they don't fit in, I want you to know that there is a place for you in this industry. Your unique perspective, your authentic self, that's what will make your culinary voice special. Embrace who you are in and out of the kitchen. That's the secret ingredient to truly great cooking. As Georgia left the stage to a standing ovation, she felt a sense of completion. She had found her place in the world as a woman and as a chef, and she was ready to use her voice to help others find theirs. In the months that followed, Georgia's life transformed once again. Le Petit Chateau's popularity soared, and she found herself juggling her roles as head chef, cookbook contributor, and emerging voice for diversity in the culinary world. She began mentoring young chefs. Her recipes, which beautifully blended traditional techniques with innovative twists, became sought after by food magazines and cooking shows. One evening, as Georgia was closing up the kitchen after another successful service, she found Robert waiting for her in the office. "Georgia," he said, his expression serious but kind, "I have a proposition for you." She sat down, curious. "What is it, Robert?" He leaned forward, his eyes twinkling. "How would you feel about becoming a partner in Le Petit Chateau?" Georgia's jaw dropped. "A partner? Me?" Robert nodded. "You've been the heart and soul of this place for years now. It's time to make it official. Plus," he added with a wink, "I'm not getting any younger. I need someone to help carry this place into the future." Tears welled up in Georgia's eyes. "Robert, I don't know what to say. Thank you. Thank you for everything." As they shook hands, sealing the deal, Georgia felt the full weight of the journey she'd been on. From a scared, closeted chef to an award-winning culinary star, and now a restaurant owner. It was more than she'd ever dared to dream. The ink was still drying on the partnership agreement when Georgia felt a surge of exhilaration ripple through her. Le Petit Chateau was no longer just her workplace. It was her legacy, her sanctuary, her triumph. She stood alone in the quiet dining room after Robert had left, the soft hum of the kitchen's lingering heat fading into silence. The weight of her accomplishment settled over her like a warm blanket, mingling with a giddy, almost reckless sense of freedom. She'd spent years proving herself, to her boss, to the culinary world, to the mirror that had once reflected a stranger. Now, as a partner in this thriving restaurant, she felt the urge to celebrate, not just the milestone, but the woman she'd fought so hard to become. Georgia decided then and there that tomorrow would be hers, a day of indulgence, a day to revel in her femininity, her confidence, her desires. She locked up the restaurant with a spring in her step, the keys jingling in her hand like a promise. That night, she barely slept, her mind buzzing with anticipation. When morning arrived, she leapt out of bed, the sunlight streaming through her window, igniting a spark of excitement. She chose her outfit with care, a light, flowy sundress in a soft peach hue that hugged her curves and flared at the hips, paired with strappy heels that clicked satisfyingly against the floor. She felt radiant, ready to claim the day. Her first destination was a chic salon downtown, a place she'd admired from afar but never felt bold enough to enter until now. The bell above the door chimed as she stepped inside, the air thick with the mingling scents of hairspray, floral shampoo, and something faintly citrusy. The salon was a symphony of sound. Clippers buzzing, blow dryers humming, stylists chatting with clients over the clink of scissors. A stylist with a sharp bob and a warm, inviting smile approached her, her eyes lighting up as she took in Georgia's energy. "Welcome! First time here?" the stylist asked, her voice bright and curious. Georgia nodded, brushing a lock of her kitchen-tamed hair behind her ear. "Yes, and I'm ready for a change." Thanks for watching. The rest won't be viewable on YouTube, so check out Patreon if you want more. I hope you have a wonderful day, my cutie.